In Australia, we have these giant huntsman spiders, and they can be as huge as a man's hand. A short while back, my husband and I were driving along and one crawled out of the air vent on the dashboard. Thankfully, it was on my husband's side and he was driving. We couldn't stop. We were right in the middle of busy traffic and we had to go to our destination and deal with it there. Distraction. There's a certain type of spiritual warfare that's aimed at taking you off course and distracting you from what God has called you to do. The temptation in these times is to divert valuable time and resource to deal with it. And this is one reason why discernment, oversight, and wisdom is so important when it comes to spiritual warfare. This is what happened to Nehemiah. God gave Nehemiah a responsibility to govern Jerusalem and to lead the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls. And in the book of Nehemiah, we learn how Judah's enemies used a number of strategies to keep the people from getting that work done. So here's 3 signs that spiritual warfare is a distraction from Nehemiah's story. And the first one is the enemy is using discouragement and intimidation. In Nehemiah chapter 4, the enemy's angry about the progress being made to rebuild the city walls, and his first response is ridicule, publicly mocks the Jews. The purpose of these insults is to get Nehemiah and the Jews to doubt their capability of whether they can do what God has called them to do. But look at what Nehemiah does. He doesn't let it get to him. He takes it to prayer and he continues the rebuilding. Second sign is that there are threats involved. When the walls were halfway to being completed, the enemies were getting agitated. Now they issued a direct threat. They were plotting a physical attack. Notice Nehemiah doesn't minimize the threats. He takes them seriously, but he doesn't stop the work either. He keeps in mind the enemy's real purpose is to get the people to stop the work of completing the walls. He puts a strategy in place, continues building, but also sets up a guard. A third sign is that there is a blatant distraction. In this case, the threat isn't directly in front of you, it's off to one side, and its chief aim is to distract and hinder you from finishing what God has called you to do, and you have a choice as to whether or not you will engage. In chapter 6 of Nehemiah, his enemies try this tactic. They send an invitation to Nehemiah to meet them, and his response is classic. I'm carrying on a great project and cannot stop. All of these threats escalate, but by the end of chapter 6, Nehemiah has persevered and that wall is built. And here's the thing, it's built without once having to directly engage in battle. So to sum up, there are going to be times when the enemy's threatening and the aim is he wants you to draw aside and engage in spiritual warfare. Be like Nehemiah. He determined to keep on going and did not allow his enemies to sway him from his God-given purpose.